The alien warship floated in the darkness of space like a giant predator. Its metal skin reflected the dim light of distant stars. Inside, the air was cold, and the silence was deep. Rows of prisoners were kept behind force fields, locked in glowing cells. Most of them were human. They had been captured during a surprise attack on an outer Earth colony. The invaders, tall insect-like creatures with armor-plated bodies and glowing red eyes, called themselves the Varnak. To them, humans were weak, noisy and foolish, easy to break, easy to ignore. Commander Duroc stood on the platform above the prison cells, his claws behind his back, his long jaw curved into a cruel grin. "Look at them," he said in his low growl. "They shake in fear, yet they call themselves warriors." His second in command, a shorter creature named Dranox, nodded. "The humans speak too much, always questioning, always hoping. We should silence them." Duroc pointed toward one of the cells. "Except that one," he said. In the last cell, sitting alone in the corner, was a man in a grey suit. He was not large, not muscular. He had short brown hair, a pale face, and dark eyes that barely blinked. He didn't scream like the others. He didn't pace or cry or pray. He simply sat. "What's wrong with him?" Dranox asked. "He hasn't said a word since we captured him," Duroc replied. "Not a sound. He just stares." "Maybe he's broken," Dranox said. Duroc leaned forward slightly. "Maybe, but I've learned to watch the quiet ones. Still, he's human. How dangerous can he be?" The other humans had noticed him too. Some had tried speaking to him during the first few days. A soldier named Marco had leaned toward the force field and whispered, "Hey, buddy, you're all right?" No response. A young woman named Rena had tried next. "Are you a soldier? A scientist? What's your name?" Still nothing. Someone finally muttered, "Creepy guy. Maybe he's in shock." They began calling him the Silent One. Time passed slowly in the prison hold. Meals were delivered through energy ports. Lights blinked on and off every 6 hours. The humans tried to stay strong. They talked. They shared stories. They cried quietly when the lights were dim. But the Silent One never moved, except to eat. He watched, always watched. Especially the guards. Then, on the 7th night, something strange happened. Guard patrols were routine. 2 Varnak guards walked past each row every cycle. But during the early hours of the 7th night, only one came back. Duroc was informed immediately. "Explain," he growled. The surviving guard looked nervous. Sweat leaked from his eye stalks. "We were passing the lower deck, near the human cells. My partner went around the corner. I waited, ... and then he didn't return. You didn't investigate. I heard something like breathing. Not normal. I got scared." Duroc hissed in anger. "Coward." Still, he went down himself with a full team. They searched every corner of the cell block. The lights flickered twice. The force fields held. The human prisoners were awake, frightened. "Is your man?" Duroc demanded. No one answered, except one. The silent human had finally moved. He stood near the edge of his cell, close to the force field. He didn't speak, but he was smiling. Just slightly. Duroc's eyes narrowed. "You," he said. "Did you see anything?" Ashen tilted his head, then looked away. Not a word. Duroc stepped back. "Double the guards," he ordered, "especially around that one." The next day, the missing guard was found. Not dead, but unconscious. He was curled in a corner of a maintenance tunnel, shivering. When he was revived, he kept repeating one sentence. "He was in my head. He was in my head." No one understood what he meant. The medics found no wounds, no drugs, no infection, just raw fear. Later, while reviewing surveillance footage, something else strange appeared. Ashen's cell camera had gone dark at the exact moment the guard vanished. The recording showed only static. Then, 3 minutes later, the camera turned. Back on. Ashen was sitting in the same position as before, as if he had never moved. Duroc watched the footage in silence. "No human can do this," he said softly. Dranox stepped forward. "Perhaps he's not just human." Duroc turned. "You think he's something else?" "I think he is hiding something," Dranox said. "Something dangerous." Duroc nodded slowly. "Bring in the scientists. I want him scanned, fully, and prepare a transport to move him to the deeper cells." Alone, the order was carried out quickly. Ashen was moved, escorted by 8 Varnak guards with energy rifles. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. But one of the guards said later that when Ashen looked at him, it felt like time stopped. The scans showed nothing unusual. No weapons, no implants, no implantments. But the scientists reviewing the data frowned. "What is it?" Dranix asked. "There's something strange," the scientist said. "His brain activity is normal, but there's a second rhythm, like a second mind inside the same skull. That's not possible." "I agree, and yet, it's there. Something is hiding." Deep Jorok listened, expressionless. Then he gave a quiet command: "Keep him locked. No one speaks to him. No one goes near him alone." But it was already too late. Ashen had begun to whisper. At night, in the silence of the ship, the guards heard it. A voice in their heads, whispering things only they knew. Memories from their past. Secrets never spoken aloud. One guard broke down, screaming. Another refused to sleep. A third tried to destroy the ship's control room, saying, "He told me to. He's coming." The humans in the other cells began to realize something terrifying. Ashen was not normal. He had never been. Rena leaned toward her force field and whispered, "Who are you?" Ashen looked at her. This time he answered, "Your only chance." She stepped back, heart racing. The warship, once quiet and controlled, now felt like a trap ready to explode. Panic grew, systems glitched, lights flickered more often. Guards started vanishing one by one, and Ashen, he was still silent, still smiling, still waiting, because fear had finally arrived. The warship's mood had changed. No one laughed anymore. The once proud Varnak guards now moved in groups of 3 or more, always watching over their shoulders. The hallways that once echoed with the stomp of alien boots now carried a different sound, silence, sharp and thick, like the quiet before a storm. Commander Jorok stood in the main control chamber, staring at the giant view screen. Behind him, his officers whispered. Systems had started failing across the ship. Lights flickered for no reason. Doors glitched open and closed. Surveillance footage turned to static at random. That it wasn't just a mechanical failure. It was something else, something deeper. "He's doing this," Jorok growled. Dranix stood beside him, the silent one. Jorak's claws tapped against the railing. "Ever since we brought him here, this ship has changed." Dranix nodded. "Morale is falling. Some guards refuse to patrol the lower decks. They say he's speaking to them." Without sound, Jorok turned sharply. "Telepathy. No known human has that power." Jaruk's red eyes narrowed. "Then he is not a normal human." Far below the control chamber, deep inside a reinforced cell, Ashen sat alone. His hands rested calmly on his knees. His eyes were half closed. He breathed slowly, like someone in deep meditation. He had been moved after the first guard disappeared. This cell was different. No cameras, no air vents, only hard metal walls, and a small slot for food. Still, the strange events continued. A guard named Tharrell was assigned to bring him food. The others warned him, but Tharrell didn't listen. "He's just a man," Tharrell said. When the door to Ashen's cell opened, Tharrell stepped inside. The moment the tray touched the floor, Ashen opened his eyes. "Why are you afraid?" he asked, softly. Tharrell froze. "I'm not." Ashen tilted his head. "Yes, you are. You dream of drowning. You hear the screams at night." Tharrell's hands began to shake. How do you know that?" Ashen stood slowly. "I don't read minds. I just listen better than most." Tharrell backed away, dropped the tray, and ran. He didn't return to duty. Later, he was found in his quarters, rocking back and forth, whispering, "He's awake. He's listening. He sees everything." Word spread fast. Ashen became a ghost, story alive, but untouchable. The prisoners talked about him in hushed tones. Some feared him. Others hoped he was on their side. Rena sat against the wall of her cell, arms wrapped around her knees. She whispered to the soldier next to her, "What if he's not here to escape, but to destroy them from the inside?" Marco shook his head. "He hasn't even moved since they locked him up. I think he's just playing with their heads. Or waiting," Rena said. In the command center, Jorok called for the chief scientist again. "I want another scan," he ordered. The scientist looked uneasy. "Commander, the equipment cannot read him correctly. The last scan showed strange spikes. We can't explain." "Try again." But Jorok's voice dropped to a deadly growl. "I don't care how. I want to know what he is." Later that day, 3 scientists approached Ashen's cell. They wore thick suits and carried scanning devices. The guards stood far back. Ashen didn't move when they entered. One of the scientists, a female named Lara, stepped forward and raised the scanner. "Do not resist," she said. Ashen opened his eyes slowly. "You're not afraid like the others." Zellara kept scanning. "I believe in science, not fear." Ashen smiled faintly. "Then you'll be the first to understand." The scanner beeped wildly. Numbers flashed too fast to read. The screen turned red. Zellara frowned. "What?" Her headset sparked. The device in her hand melted. The two other scientists screamed and ran out of the cell. Zellara stood frozen, shaking. Ashen stepped closer, not aggressive. "Tell your commander this. I didn't come here to escape. I came here to learn." Zellara nodded slowly, fear finally catching her. She backed out without another word. That evening, she brought the results to Jorok. "There is no pattern," she said, "no logic. He breaks every rule we know. His mind is not like ours." Jorok stared at the screen. "Is he a weapon?" Zellara hesitated. "If he is, he built himself." Jorok turned toward the bridge window, staring into the stars. "Increase security. Keep him isolated. He will not control this ship." But it was already happening. Overnight, every door lock system on the ship reset. The backup systems were locked out. The engineers couldn't explain it. They said it looked like an internal virus. Then came the second disappearance. A Varnak officer went to deliver a system report. He never returned. His communicator was found on the floor near our cell. No signs of a struggle. No blood. Nothing. Jorok ordered a lockdown. "All hands inside," he roared. "No one approaches that human. From now on, we speak of him as an enemy." "But he's in a cell," Dranik said quietly. Jorok turned. "A cell cannot hold a storm, and he is a storm." The human prisoners began to notice a pattern. Every time Ashen looked at a guard, that guard would vanish within a day. Every time Ashen spoke, something on the ship would break. The more they ignored him, the more powerful he seemed to become. One night, Rena dreamed of her childhood, her brother, her old home. But in the dream, Ashen was there, watching. She woke up sweating. "I think he's inside our minds," she whispered to Marco. Marco asked, "I don't know, but I don't think he's human anymore." Back in his dark cell, Ashen sat in perfect stillness. The walls pulsed around him like they were breathing. The lights buzzed. Somewhere above, the ship groaned. He whispered, "To no one, you should have never brought me here." The ship listened. It was already too late. Outside his cell, the corridor lights shut off one by one, and then he smiled. The warship drifted through deep space like a wounded beast. From the outside, it still looked powerful, its black hull strong, its engines steady. But inside, fear had settled like smoke. The crew didn't speak unless they had to. Eyes stayed. Low orders were given in hushed tones. Everyone felt it, the pressure, the tension, the silence. And in the center of it all, buried in the darkest corner of the ship, was the man no one dared to name aloud. Ashen, locked in his deep cell, with no windows, no technology, and no sound, he waited. He hadn't moved in hours, or maybe days. No one could tell any more. Commander Jorok stood in the control center, red eyes locked on a glowing map of the ship. "Explain it again," he said coldly. Dranik shifted nervously beside him. The power fluctuations started near the prisoner wing. 2 decks lost internal lights. No external signal. No physical damage. Sabotage. No signs. It's like the systems just gave up. Jorok turned to the lead engineer. "What about your backup grid?" The engineer looked pale. "It failed. 3 levels shorted out. The strange thing is our system registered no access. No one touched anything." Jorok's claw tapped the metal rail. "He's doing this, but he has no tools," Dranak said. "No access. He's locked inside." "Enough," Jorok snapped. "Lock the entire prisoner section. Post 6. Guards outside his cell. Anyone who hears a voice in their head, report to me immediately." The command was obeyed, but with little confidence. Everyone had seen the pattern. Systems failed where Ashen stayed. Minds broke where he looked. Hours passed. Then came the first real strike. It started quietly. One of the guards, Varric, stood outside Ashen's cell with his blaster tight in hand. His partner Harlock paced behind him. "I don't like this," Harlock muttered. Varric didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the cell. Ashen was staring at him again. Suddenly, Varric's weapon shook. His arms twitched. The metal hummed. "What are you doing?" Harlock shouted. I can't." Varric gasped, dropping his blaster. He's in my head. Ashen stepped forward, slowly, calmly. Varek's knees buckled. He collapsed, clutching his helmet. He's showing me things, burning planets, my family screaming. I can't breathe. Then the lights exploded. Down the hallway, every light bulb burst in a flash of sparks. Energy barriers fizzled out. Alarms started, but cut off immediately. Jorok received the alert and rushed to the prisoner wing with a squad of 10 armed guards. By the time he arrived, the hallway was dark, silent. Harlock was alone, shaking. Varek was gone. Where is he? Gorik barked. I don't know. Harlock cried. He just vanished. Gorok turned to the remaining soldiers. Search every room. Find that guard. If he's alive, I want him questioned. If he's not, I want proof. Ashen was still in his cell, standing perfectly still. Jorak walked to the front of the force field. What are you? He asked. Ashen tilted his head slightly. The question is, what did you wake up? Jorok stepped back. You are not just human. No, Ashen said simply. Jorok turned. Move him to the lower isolation block. No electronics. No doors. Just walls. The guards prepared for the transfer. They surrounded Ashen with high-pressure energy weapons. Shackles were clamped to his wrists and ankles. A steel mask was locked over his face. Ashen didn't resist. He walked calmly as they led him through the ship's corridors. Every step echoed. Every crew member they passed turned away, refusing to meet his eyes. Then, the lights went out again. Total blackout. Backup power now. A guard shouted. Nothing happened. Then something worse. The sound of heavy metal doors, unlocking not one, many. All across the ship, red emergency lights flickered on. The ship's AI announced in a cold voice. System breach. Containment failure. Security grid offline. Jorak's voice screamed over the comms. Get him back to the cell. Now. But it was too late. In front of the guards, Ashen lifted his hands. The shackles unlocked themselves. The steel mask dropped to the floor. He looked at the guards. Run, he said quietly. Two obeyed immediately. The others tried to fight. They fired their weapons, but the energy pulses never hit him. They bent around him, like water avoiding a stone. Ashen stepped forward. One by one, the guards fell. No blood, no wounds, just ... unconscious. Their faces frozen in terror. Gorok watched through the security feed, horrified. He's not a weapon, he said. Dranax whispered. He's a force of nature. Ashen stood alone in the hallway. Lights flickered behind him. Smoke drifted from broken panels. His eyes glowed slightly now, dim and cold. The human prisoners, still locked in their cells, heard the alarms. They saw shadows moving. Then, their force fields dropped. Doors opened. They stepped out slowly, unsure. Ashen was there. He looked at them one by one. Rena stepped forward. Did you do this? Ashen didn't answer. Marco asked, are you going to kill them all? Ashen looked toward the upper levels. Only the ones who deserve it. Sirens blared across the ship. Alien officers screamed orders. Seal the armory. Get the High Council to the escape pods. But none of it mattered. Ashen was free. And for the first time in the galaxy, the most feared being on the ship was a silent, unarmed human. Smoke filled the corridors of the Varnock warship. Red lights blinked in chaotic patterns. Doors hissed open and closed without command. Sparks dropped from broken ceiling panels like rain. The mighty ship, once a fortress of fear, now trembled. From within, Ashen moved through the chaos without fear. He walked calmly down the center of the hallway, the unconscious guards behind him like scattered leaves. Around him, the walls groaned and screens flickered. Security bots powered down. As he passed, lights dimmed when he looked up. It was as if the ship recognized him, like it had become a living thing obeying his silent will. Rena watched him from behind a corner. The other human prisoners stood with Herfried, but frozen. No one dared step in front of Ashen. He was too quiet, too calm, too powerful. Should we follow him? Marco whispered. I don't know, Rena said. But I'm not staying behind. They walked after Ashen, carefully, like children trailing a sleeping lion. In the command center, panic had taken control. Jorak's claws slammed onto the control panel. Where is he now? Dranax checked the screen. He's heading for the neural core, Jorak snarled. Why? He doesn't even know what that is. He knows everything now, Dranax said quietly. Jorak spun to face him. What do you mean? Dranax gulped. The ship's AI confirmed it. He accessed the main systems without touching them. We don't know how. He simply connected. Jorak froze. Connected. Dranix nodded. He's in the system. Jorok turned to the guards. If he reaches the neural core, he'll have full control of everything. Airlocks, weapons, the ship's brain. A young officer spoke up, voice shaking. Should we evacuate? Jorok didn't answer right away. He stared at the screen, watching the slow, steady movement of Ashen down the corridor. No, Jorok said finally. We're not running from a human. He turned to Dranix. Send the mind scanners. I want to know what he is thinking. Ashen stood at the door to the neural core. It was locked, tight, thick metal. Security, protected by biometric scans. He raised one hand. The lock clicked open. No codes, no tools, just presence. He stepped inside. The neural core was a round chamber, lit in pulsing blue. It glowed like a heartbeat. In the center, a pillar rose from floor to ceiling, covered in shifting data, energy veins, and crystal circuits. Ashen walked to it, placed one hand on the surface. He closed his eyes, and the ship shuddered. Every screen on every deck flashed, white, for 1 second. Then words appeared, written in the human's language. I see you now. Jorik read the words, his voice trembling. He's speaking through the ship. Suddenly, static crackled in the command center speakers. A voice broke through. Calm, human male, Ashen's voice. You took hundreds. You experimented. You tortured. You called us simple. The growled. Turn it off. The technician screamed. We can't. He's bypassing every control. Ashen's voice continued, steady as a heartbeat. But you didn't see me. You looked at noise, not silence. You studied fear, not patience. You trained for war, but forgot what survival really means. In the hallway outside the core, Rena and the others listened. Marco leaned against the wall, whispering, he's not just human anymore. Rena shook her head. No, he's something more. Back in the control room, Jorak roared. Find him. Burn that chamber to ash. Elite guards were sent. 10 of them, armed with mind shields, heavy weapons, and chemical armor. They moved like shadows, surrounding the neural core from every side. They entered. Ashen turned to face them. The leader raised his weapon. On your knees. Ashen blinked. The guns exploded in their hands. No fire, no noise, just gone. One of the soldiers screamed and dropped to the ground, clutching his head. Another turned and ran, only to freeze mid-step, eyes wide, whispering, he knows my name. From before I was born. The leader fell to his knees. Make it stop, please. Ashen stepped forward, eyes glowing slightly. I'm not hurting you, he said. You're hurting yourselves. Your mind is showing you what it fears most. I just opened the door. He walked past them, leaving them trembling on the floor. Back in the command chamber, Dranix stepped toward Jorak. We cannot defeat him. Jorak turned, voice shaking with anger. I will not bow to a human. He's already inside. Everything he knows, our plans, our secrets. He knows what you fear. Jorak paused. Fear. Dranix nodded. He's not just attacking us with weapons. He's turning our own minds against us. Jorak looked around the room. The screens showed static. The lights dimmed again. Then the screens lit up with one image. Ashen, just standing in the neural core, watching Jorik, stared into the screen. What do you want? Ashen's voice came through every speaker. You took from us. Now I'm taking from you. Jorak shouted. Taking what? Your confidence, Ashen said. Your control, your safety. Hours passed. The ship was silent. No more guards patrolled the halls. No more orders were shouted. The warship felt like a grave. Rena and the other humans moved freely now. They followed Ashen as he walked the decks. But Ashen didn't act like a leader. He didn't smile, didn't give speeches. He simply watched, listened, waited. Marco finally asked, what are you going to do now? Ashen looked at the stars through a window. They wanted a weapon, he said. So I became one. But not for them, for us. Are we safe? Rena asked. Ashen nodded. For now. She looked at him carefully. You don't feel like a human anymore. He looked at her. That's because the humans you knew were always too loud. You never saw the ones who stayed quiet and waited. Then he turned away, walking into the shadows of the ship. And behind him, the lights continued to flicker, because now, he was inside everything. The alien warship floated adrift, silent and directionless. What once roared with commands, with stomping boots and mechanical chatter, now whispered only fear. Control had slipped from the Varnok's claws and they knew it. Commander stood at the center of the ship's command deck, motionless, eyes locked on the dark screen. Ashen's face was gone now. The image had disappeared an hour ago, but the echo of his voice still haunted the crew. "We can't reach the neural core," one technician whispered. "He's locked it down completely." And asked, voice low and cold. "Offline. Reboot attempts failed. We're dead in space." Jorak slowly turned toward Dranix. "Then this is no longer a warship. It's a tomb." Dranix didn't speak. He stared at the floor, claws twitching, slammed his fist into the control panel. "He's just one human." One Dranix looked up, voice hollow. "He's more than that now." In the lower decks, lights flickered as Ashen walked silently through the corridors. Behind him, a growing group of freed humans followed Rena, Marco, and others from the prison cells. They moved carefully, respectfully, never stepping too close. No one dared touch Ashen or asked too many questions. The way he moved, the way doors opened before he reached them, the way security systems ignored him, it all felt ... unnatural. Rena finally broke the silence. "Are you leading us to the escape hangars?" Ashen didn't stop walking. "Not yet." "Why not?" "We should leave, before they find a way to fight back." He glanced over his shoulder. "They won't fight back." Marco looked confused. "Then what are we waiting for?" Ashen stepped into a circular chamber. It was dark, filled with humming tubes and flickering holograms. He reached toward the wall, and suddenly the lights glowed bright. "This is their control memory," he said. "The ship's true brain, what they used to record every war, every crime." The humans stood frozen. Rena asked, "Why show us?" This Asian's voice was calm. "Because truth is power, and they've hidden it from the galaxy for too long." He waved his hand. Screens lit up around the room. Images flickered. Varnak, fleets burning human colonies, prisoners experimented on, children taken, footage the world had never seen. Marco gasped. "They erased all this from the history archives. They built their empire on silence," Ashen said. "But silence doesn't belong to them anymore." He placed his hand on the control node. A low hum rose as the ship's transmitter powered up. "What are you doing?" Rena asked. "I'm sending this to Earth," he said. "To the colonies, to everyone." On the ship's upper decks, sirens suddenly flared. Broadcast signal initiated. Jorak's eyes went wide. "He's exposing us." "Cut the signal," he screamed. The technician tried. The system rejected every command. "He's using the emergency war channel. We can't override." Across the stars, in distant stations, on planets, and orbiting defense platform, screens blinked on. The truth played. Ashen's voice followed. "They called us weak. They called us slow. But they forgot the danger of quiet minds. They forgot that patience isn't peace. And now, we remember." Jorak stood in silence. Then he gave the order. "Arm the core. If we can't stop him, we'll take the ship down." Dranix turned sharply. "You want to destroy the whole ship?" With us inside, Jorak's eyes were burning. "If we die, he dies too." Ashen's head lifted. He turned slowly to the humans. "He's going to blow the core." "How do you know?" Rena asked. "I don't need to hear him," Ashen said. "I can feel his fear." Marco stepped forward. "Then we really need to go. Now." Ashen nodded. "Follow me." They moved fast now, through tunnels and locked doors that opened at his glance. They passed empty guard posts, broken drones, dead systems. The ship was coming undone around them. In the escape hangar, rows of dropships sat waiting. Rena gasped. "They haven't locked these down." "They can't," Ashen said. "Not anymore." Marco ran to the nearest ship. "This one's ready." The humans began boarding. Ashen stayed at the edge of the hangar, looking back down the hall. His eyes narrowed. "Come on," Rena shouted. "We have to go." He stepped back slowly. "You'll go." "I'm staying." "What?" she said, stunned. "No." "Why?" "I'm the reason they're doing this," Ashen said. "I started it. I end it." She stepped closer. "But you can't survive a core blast." Ashen gave a small smile. "That made me to die in silence. Now I choose to speak by staying." She stared at him. "You're not just human anymore, are you?" "I'm still human," he said softly. "But I'm the part they tried to erase." The humans boarded the ship. Rena looked at him one last time. "Thank you," she whispered. The doors closed. Ashen watched the dropship fly out into the stars. Alarms screamed behind him. The core was heating up. Rook was moments away from pressing the final command. But when he reached for the detonator, hand froze. He couldn't move. He looked around. The lights dimmed. The control panels sparked. Then he heard the voice, Ashen's voice. "You want to destroy everything to stop one man. What does that make you?" Jorak shouted. "Get out of my head." Ashen's voice remained calm. "I'm not in your head. I'm in your fear." Jorak fell to his knees. "What are you?" Ashen whispered back. "I'm what happens when you ignore the quiet ones for too long." Then the lights went out. The ship's engines died, and the escape pod where the humans sat flew further and further, away toward the stars, toward Earth, carrying not just survivors, but a story that would change everything, a story of a silent human, ... who became their worst nightmare. The escape pod carrying Rena, Marco, and the other freed humans drifted through space, moving farther from the warship with every second. Inside the pod, the survivors sat in silence. No one spoke. No one cheered. Their eyes were locked on the shrinking image of the alien ship behind them. The vessel had gone dark. Its massive engines were cold. No weapons fired. No pursuit followed. It was as if the ship had simply given up or surrendered. Rena stood near the viewport, staring at the shadows beyond the stars. He stayed behind. She whispered. Marco walked up beside her. He knew the ship would explode. He knew he'd die. He chose it. Rena said he didn't want to be saved. He wanted to finish it himself. But why? Marco asked. He already won. We were free. They were broken. Rena's voice dropped to a whisper. Because Ashen wasn't just fighting the Varnak. He was fighting what they made him into. Back on the warship, deep in the metal heart of the vessel, the air felt different. It wasn't hot or cold. It wasn't silent. It pulsed with a low hum like something breathing beneath steel. Commander Jorak lay on the floor of the command deck, his armor cracked, his breathing slow. The detonator he had held was gone. His claws twitched helplessly. Put across from him stood Ashen. The lights above flickered, casting shadows across Ashen's face. His expression was calm, but unreadable. "You were ready to die," Ashen said. "To destroy your crew, your ship, your legacy, all for control." Jorak groaned. You don't understand. I had no choice." Ashen stepped closer. "You had every choice. You just never believed we did." Jorak turned his head. "What are you? You're not human." "I'm more human than you'll ever be," Ashen said softly. "Because I remember pain. I remember what silence feels like. You only remember power." The ship creaked around them. Dr. Ann Ox crawled into the chamber, wounded and coughing. His eyes widened when he saw Ashen. "You survived the core blast." Ashen nodded. "I stopped it." Drinex looked at Jorak. "He controls the ship. He controls everything." Ashen said nothing. He just turned and walked toward the central interface. As he placed his hand on it, the ship's lights steadied. The flickering stopped. The systems rebooted, but it wasn't like before. Now the ship felt alive, balanced. Gorik struggled to sit up. "What do you want from us?" Ashen turned to face him. "I don't want anything from you. I want you to see what happens when you ignore the quiet ones." Drinex shook his head slowly. "We never thought. A human." Ashen's voice dropped to a whisper. "That was your mistake." On Earth, the broadcast from the warship had already changed everything. The footage Ashen sent of Varnak brutality, of the prison experiments, of the truth played across every screen in every city. News networks scrambled to translate, explain, and verify. But no one could deny it. Humanity had been hunted, experimented on, and one of their own had turned the tide not with armies or fleets, but with silence, with patience, with power. He became a legend overnight. Some called him the Ghost Soldier, others called him the Quiet Storm, but most just called him Ashen. Military leaders demanded answers. Scientists reviewed the footage frame by frame. Who was he? Where had he come from? How could he do what he did? The answer lay hidden in one of Earth's oldest black files, Project Ashfall, a program that never officially existed. A final attempt, during the early years of the Varnak conflict, to create humans who could survive deep capture, infiltration, and psychic warfare. Volunteers were rare. Survivors were rarer. Ashen had been one of them, and the last. Back on the warship, the surviving Varnak crew had been gathered in the cargo bay. No weapons, no chains. Ashen had released them from duty. He didn't speak much. He didn't threaten. He simply stood there and watched. Jorak, still weak, looked at the gathered crew. "You should kill us." Ashen didn't move. Jorak raised his voice. "We would have killed you. That's why you failed." Ashen replied, "You only know one path: fear, control, destruction." Dranik stood behind the other Varnak, his voice soft. "What will you do with us?" Ashen looked at them all. "You'll leave this ship, you'll return to your world, and you'll remember that the quietest voice in the room may be the one holding it all together." Jorak's eyes narrowed. "And if we return to war?" Ashen turned his head slightly. "Then I won't be the one you meet next time, but someone will." The Varnak lowered their heads. Ashen stepped forward and opened the hangar doors. Escape crafts powered on. He offered no guidance, no warning, just silence. Rena stood in front of a government tribunal. Weeks later, Earth officials and colony leaders sat in sharp uniforms, faces serious. "You were on the warship during the event?" the lead official asked. "Yes," Rena replied. "You saw him, yes." The official paused. "And in your words, what was he?" Rena looked up slowly. "He was what we needed, what they feared. He was a reminder that silence is not weakness. It's waiting." The room was quiet. No one questioned her further. Somewhere in deep space, the warship floated again, empty now. Silent Ashen stood alone on the bridge, staring at the stars. He didn't need food. He didn't need sleep. The ship responded to him, like it was a part of his mind. He had left Earth behind, not to hide, but to watch, because war wasn't over. The galaxy was still dangerous. Enemies still hunted the weak. Power still crushed silence. But now, they would hesitate, because the legend of the silent human had spread, and fear had changed sides. The warship drifted silently through deep space, cloaked by the void. From a distance, it looked like a ghost, dead, abandoned, forgotten, but deep inside its hull, light still glowed, systems still breathed, and one man still watched. Ashen stood at the command window, his eyes locked on the stars. He no longer needed charts to know where he was. The ship responded to his thoughts, showing him everything: movements of fleets, whispers of colonies, quiet cries from distant worlds. The universe was louder than it had ever been, but Ashen remained silent. His mission wasn't over. It had only changed across the galaxy. The name Ashen spread like fire. On colony walls, murals appeared, painted in black and gray, showing a lone figure standing before a broken fleet. In underground forums, soldiers spoke his name in whispers, hoping to learn his methods, his origins, his mind. And in Varnock space, a new fear took root. Not of armies, not of weapons, but of silence. Jorak had returned to his homeworld, disgraced and broken. His once proud face was now tired, his armor dull. Varnak High Command demanded answers. He gave them one name: Ashen. They didn't believe him at first. Until Ashen struck again. It began on the remote mining colony of Vetra-9, a Varnock supply base, small and isolated. The officers there were known for cruelty. Humans were used as workers, stripped of rights, barely fed. No communication was allowed off-world. One night, the skies turned black. Every satellite lost signal. The base's AI went offline, and then, one by one, the guards disappeared. Not killed, gone by morning. The humans were free. The base's locks opened. Control systems were wiped. No alarms had sounded. No battle had occurred. But on the command screen, one phrase was left behind: "You were too loud." The Varnock High Council met in secret. Panic had begun to grow. This was no longer a single event. Ashen was becoming a movement. Draniks, who had survived Ashen's awakening, warned the council. He tried to build fear. Now fear has turned on you. But they didn't listen. They increased defenses, built stronger prisons, reinforced old warships. Still, Ashen came. Rena had returned to Earth, but peace didn't sit well with her. She had seen too much. She had followed Ashen through the dark corridors of that warship, seen what silence could do when it was finally heard. Now, she worked with Earth's resistance network, a quiet group of leaders, soldiers, and thinkers. People who didn't trust loud heroes or shiny medals. People who believed change started from the shadows. Rena trained other survivors, volunteers, former prisoners. She didn't teach them to fight like soldiers. She taught them to observe, to wait, to use patience as a weapon. Because that's what Ashen had done. He had listened. And then, when the moment came, he had struck like a storm. On the outer edge of the known systems, Ashen found something new. A distress signal, human in origin. Faint, old. The ship brought it to life on the screen. It was from a colony no longer listed on star maps. Ashen narrowed his eyes. "Play it." The message crackled through. "We were attacked. No help came. Underground now. They've taken everything. If anyone hears this, please." The voice cut out. Ashen didn't speak. He didn't ask who or why. He simply turned the ship toward the signal. The engines glowed faintly, and the warship moved. The colony of Karasix was a forgotten place, covered in ice, barren, cold, but beneath the frost, deep underground, humans hid like ghosts. Varnak raiders had taken over the surface. They used the colony to extract rare minerals, forcing the few survivors into darkness, crushing anyone who resisted, until the sky changed, until a black warship appeared without warning, without sound. Varnak patrols scrambled, anti-air guns turned upward. They fired, but their blasts curved mid-air, bending away as if dodging an invisible shield. Then the lights died, all of them, across the colony. The Varnak shouted in confusion, and then the whisper came, just one word, Ashen. One by one, the weapons shut down. One by one, the ships fell silent. One by one, the guards dropped to their knees, clutching their heads, as their worst memories played behind their eyes. By morning, Karasix was free. Not a single human died. Not a single Varnak could explain what had happened. Only the humans saw the figure walking through the snow, his coat gray, his steps slow, his eyes sharp as frozen steel. Ashen never spoke. He only looked at the freed. Families then vanished into the fog. Rina received the news from a pilot who had seen the warship leave Karo-6. She smiled quietly. "He's still out there," she whispered. Marco, who now worked beside her in the resistance, asked, "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Rina shook her head. "He never left. Not really. He's in every act of quiet rebellion. Every time someone chooses to resist without shouting. Every time someone waits and listens." Marco nodded. "He became more than a man." "No," Rina replied. "He became what a man becomes when you push him too far and don't hear his silence." She paused. "And now, the galaxy listens. Somewhere, far beyond the edge of human territory." Ashen stood alone once more, his warship waiting silently behind him. He looked at a new planet below. Another signal, another cry for help. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just listened. Because he knew something the Varnak had forgotten. Silence is not weakness. It's a warning. And when silence finally speaks, it echoes forever. In the shadowed edges of the galaxy, a quiet war had begun. No flags were raised. No fleets launched. No declarations were made. But world by world, system by system, the Varnak Empire began to crack. It wasn't from the front lines. It wasn't from bombs or battalions. It was from whispers, rumors, spread of a silent human. A man with no army, no nation, only a voice so powerful, he never needed to raise it. They called him Ashen. And now, even speaking his name brought unease to powerful Varnak warlords. Some banned the word entirely. Others denied he existed. But their soldiers had seen him. Their scientists had tried to study him, and every time they tried to catch him, their ships went dark. On the human colony of Velran 3, a group of resistance fighters sat gathered in an underground tunnel. Dust filled the air. Their supplies were low. Varnak forces had tightened control over the colony in recent months. Food shipments were blocked, communication jammed, and patrols doubled. Among the group sat Rina and Marco. They had been sent here to train local fighters, to guide the next spark of rebellion, but the mood was grim. "They've blocked every route out of the city," a local man said. "Even the sewers are scanned. We can't move without losing people." Another woman added, "3 of ours were taken yesterday. No trial. Just ... gone." Rina looked down at a cracked datapad in her hand. A faint signal blinked on the screen. "He heard," she whispered. Marco looked at her. "Ashen," she nodded. "I sent out the signal. Same as Karo 6, same frequency." The others stared. One of them, a young fighter named Taran, scoffed. "That's just a story. A legend. Some phantom you all made up to give people hope." Rina looked at him calmly. "He's real." Taran crossed his arms. "Even if he was, he can't help us now. We're buried under Varnak control." A soft hum echoed through the tunnel. The lights flickered. The air shifted. Then, silence. No alarms. No explosions, just a feeling, like the wind before a storm. Outside, the sky over Velran 3 darkened, above the clouds. cloaked by atmosphere. A warship floated dead silent, with no ID signals, no calls, and no warning. The Varnock patrols didn't notice it at first. Until their drones stopped responding, until their weapons wouldn't fire, until the lights across their base went out, one by one. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. Ashen had already landed. He moved through the city like a shadow. No gear, no guards. He wore a dark coat and no armor. His hands were empty. But wherever he stepped, Varnock soldiers collapsed not from bullets, but from fear, visions, memories, sounds only they could hear. In the command tower, the Varnock captain stood watching screens go dark. Someone is in the system. He shouted, "Trace it." His technician screamed back, "There's no signal. He's not in the system. He is the system." Suddenly, the main screen flickered. Ashen's face appeared, but not as a threat, just watching. "You fed on silence." His voice echoed through the base. "Now it feeds on you." Vothel reached for the emergency lockdown. The panel melted under his hand. He turned to run, but the lights failed, and behind him stood Ashen. He didn't strike, he didn't move, he just whispered, "This ends now." Vothel dropped to the ground, shaking, weeping. Outside, every cell door opened. The humans walked out, blinking in confusion. No one had fired a single shot. The guards were gone. Renner and Marco stood at the top of a destroyed watchtower, watching the silent ship rise above the clouds once more. Terran stood beside them, speechless. "I told you," Renner said quietly. "He doesn't fight wars." Marco added, "He ends them." Word spread quickly. 3 more colonies rose up within days. 5 more. Varnock bases were abandoned overnight. No one saw Ashen again, but his ship was spotted in distant systems, always floating, always silent. And whenever it appeared, the fled. They had weapons, he had presence. Back on the Varnock homeworld, the High Council was in crisis. Reports stacked up on every desk. Colonies falling, troops deserting, technology failing in Ashen's presence. One admiral stood, slamming his fist on the table. "We have to strike Earth directly. End this at the root." Another snarled, "We tried that for years. Every time, they grow stronger." Dranek stood in silence at the end of the chamber. He had seen Ashen with his own eyes. He had watched him tear down an empire without touching a single weapon. "I warned you," Dranex finally said. "You created this. You ignored him. You laughed at his silence." He leaned forward, and now his silence is louder than all of us. In deep space, Ashen stood once more at the warship's observation deck. He watched 2 fleets on opposite ends of the stars. One human, one Varnock. They hadn't attacked yet. Tensions were high. One move would bring another war. He didn't speak. He didn't send a message. He simply opened a signal between both ships. Let them see each other. Let them hear each other. Let them feel the presence of one man who had turned fear itself into a message. Both sides stood down. No blood was spilled. Back on Earth, Rena walked through a garden under soft sunlight. It had been months since she had seen Ashen, but everywhere she went, people talked about him. Old farmers, young students, military commanders. All of them asked the same thing. Where is he now? And all Rena could ever say was where he's needed. Because Ashen didn't live in one place anymore. He lived in every silence that held back violence. In every whisper that stopped to scream. In every moment when power paused because of fear. The Whisper War had no dates, no battles, no medals, but it changed everything. And in its center was one man, silent, alone, watching, and reminding the galaxy never ignore the quiet ones. The galaxy was no longer the same. Where once fleets of the Varnock Empire moved with unchecked power, now hesitation spread like cracks in stone. Every command was second-guessed. Every colony questioned its loyalty. And behind it all, like a ghost no one could trap, was Ashen. He didn't speak to crowds. He didn't lead armies, but his presence lingered like a shadow in every corner of space. And in that silence, the Empire began to unravel far beyond the core worlds. Near the edge of unexplored space, a Varnock research vessel named the Argathel drifted above an uncharted planet. The ship wasn't designed for war, but for experiments, classified, secret, and dangerous. Inside, scientists worked in cold silence. In a chamber deep within the vessel, something was contained, something powerful. A human child, barely 12 years old. She had no name, just a code. Subject E9. And like Ashen once was, she had been taken from a forgotten colony, raised not with love, but commands. Her mind had been tested, trained, twisted, but something inside her had resisted. She never screamed, never cried, never spoke, and that terrified them. Dr. Varash paced the observation deck, watching E9 through a thick glass wall. She's not reacting anymore, he growled. The psychic dampeners have stopped working. She's resisting harder each day. Another scientist adjusted his screen. Her vitals are rising, brainwave activity increasing, especially during quiet periods. Varosh narrowed his eyes. She's listening to something, or someone. A technician approached, pale-faced. Sir, he said quietly, we picked up a signal. It's not from us. Varash turned sharply. What signal? The tech swallowed. A wave, silent. No data, no sound, but it's affecting the child. Varash stared through the glass. E9 had opened. Her eyes, for the first time in her life, she stared directly at him, and smiled. Far above, in the empty stars above the ship, space shimmered. Then, a shape emerged. Ashen's warship. Silent. Still. And watching. The Argathel's alarms blared. Defenses activated. Automated systems screamed warnings, but no weapons fired. Instead, one by one, control systems failed. Lights dimmed. Gravity fluctuated. Hallways curved in impossible ways. Time seemed to stretch and shrink. Varash screamed orders. Activate. Emergency escape pods. Wipe the data. Kill Subject E9 before they reach her. But the door to the chamber had already opened, and E9 was no longer alone. Ashen stood beside her. No one saw how he got there. No alarms were triggered. He simply was. Varash stumbled backward, his voice trembling. You, again. Ashen's voice was soft. It didn't learn. Varash tried to draw a weapon. His hand froze mid-motion. You won't win forever. You're alone. Just a man. Ashen stepped forward. So are you. And with a single thought, the chamber collapsed inward, not with fire, but with silence. Every wall, every screen, every tool, gone, erased. Ashen turned to the girl. You're free now. She looked up at him. Who are you? She whispered. Ashen paused. Someone who wasn't heard, he said, until they listened too late. The girl reached out and took his hand. Together, they walked out of the chamber. News of the Argathel's disappearance spread quickly. It was found days later, completely empty. No crew, no records. Just a message left in the ship's main console. Single phrase, you cannot cage silence. The Varnic Empire panicked. This wasn't just about Ashen anymore. There were others like him, others they had taken, twisted, and ignored. Now those quiet minds were waking up, and they remembered everything. On Earth, Rena stood in front of a large gathering in the new colonial assembly hall. It wasn't a political event. There were no speeches. Just names. Names of freed colonies, names of lost prisoners, now returned, and among them, a new name, E9, now known as Elara. The girl had arrived with no fear, no memories of parents, but with power that shook even Earth's top scientists. They tested her, scanned her, and found traces of Ashen's signal inside her. He had passed something on, not through blood, but through connection. A new generation of silent minds had begun to rise. Rena spoke quietly to the crowd. You asked if Ashen was real, if he was the last of his kind. The answer is no. He was the first. She looked toward the stars. And now, there are more. Ashen stood again on his ship. Elara sat beside him, watching a screen filled with stars. Why don't we stop them all now? She asked. Because silence teaches better than noise, Ashen replied, and fear teaches faster than orders. She tilted her head. Will we always be alone? Ashen looked down at her. We're never alone. Not as long as someone listens. She smiled, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a test subject. She felt like something more, something powerful, something silent. The galaxy moved forward. The Varnek Council grew quieter. Fewer colonies were attacked. More prisoners were released without reason. Because now, every time a scream was heard, a whisper answered, and every time fear was used, it was returned tenfold. They had once built an empire on control, but now, they lived in the shadow of a man who had turned their silence into a weapon. Ashen had become more than a myth. He had become a movement, and his echo would never fade. The stars stretched endlessly across the void, glittering with secrets too vast for words. Somewhere between the spiral arms of two forgotten galaxies, Ashon's warship hovered in absolute silence. No comms, no pulse beacons, no registration. It wasn't hiding, it simply was. Ashon stood alone on the bridge, arms folded behind him. Before him, dozens of holograms, flickered reports of intercepted signals, movements of Varnak fleets, shifts in psychic resonance across human colonies, and something else, a pattern. Each flash of violence, each lost colony, each broken mind, all pointed to one final convergence. They weren't just reacting to Ashon anymore, they were planning on the Varnak homeworld. Deep beneath the Imperial chambers, the High Council gathered in a vault, lined with psychic shields and noise-cancelling walls. None spoke without authorization. Even breath was measured. High Warlord Threx stood at the center. "We have allowed this thing to haunt us long enough," he growled, voice trembling with barely restrained fury. "He has broken our fleets, exposed our secrets, turned silence into fear." Another general nodded. "And worse, he's not alone anymore." They showed footage of Ilara, her face calm, her presence impossible to track. "She's transmitting," Threx said, "on the same frequencies, Ashon's frequencies." A third voice, cold and mechanical, interrupted. "They're forming something new, a silent resistance. Dozens, maybe hundreds now." Threx clenched his jaw. "Then we erased them. All of them that very night." Ashon received the signal. He was already watching. Ilara stood beside him, arms crossed. "They're going after the colonies again." "Not just that," Ashon replied, his voice low. "They're trying to erase what we've become, not with fear, but with silence of their own." He brought up a projection, hundreds of locations, marked in red. Each one represented a psychic disturbance or unexplained disappearance. He tapped a flashing point at the center. "Site Z0, the core." Ilara frowned. "They're drawing us in." Ashon nodded. "Yes, but they don't understand what happens when you invite silence into your home." Across Earth and its farthest colonies, Ashon's message arrived. No sound, no video, just a simple phrase on every screen. "They called us nothing. Now we are everything. From old soldiers to young orphans, from former prisoners to cybernetic engineers, all who had once been broken by the Varnak's grip and sword." They didn't gather fleets. They didn't send threats. They simply moved, quietly, one by one, toward the stars. Toward Zeos was an ancient facility long abandoned, deep in a planetary chasm, surrounded by mountains of steel and rivers of fire. It had once been a control center during the Varnak's earliest conquests. Now it had become something worse, a psychic forge. There, the Varnak had built a weapon, not of metal, not of code, but of thought, a weapon designed to destroy consciousness. To strip identity from anyone who resisted. At its heart was a massive neural core, beating like a heart, tuned to frequencies that targeted only the human mind. And at its center was the trap. Ashon landed without sound. He walked through molten corridors, the metal walls twitching at his presence. No alarms triggered, no doors blocked him. They wanted him to enter, and he did. In the command chamber, Warlord Threx stood. Before the core, hands behind his back. Around him were Varnak scientists and elite warriors, all wearing mind shields that flickered with unstable energy. The lights dimmed. Ashon entered. No weapons, no fear, just silence. "So you finally came," Threx sneered. "The great shadow, the myth." Ashon tilted his head slightly. "You called me, we called you out," Threx growled. "You've infected our worlds. Our soldiers dream your face. Our machines glitch when you're near. You are a virus." Ashon said nothing. "You won't leave this room," Threx continued. "You'll be wiped, erased from existence. You'll vanish without a sound." Ashon took one step forward, and the lights exploded. The neural core surged, releasing waves of psychic energy. The warriors raised their weapons. Energy beams lit the chamber and hit nothing. Ashon had moved, not run, not dodged, moved, like space itself had shifted. He stood now at the core, hand on its surface, and the screams began not from Ashon but from the VAR. No K. One by one. The soldiers dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. The scientists screamed in alien tongues. Threx staggered back as the core began to pulse out of control. What is he doing?" The lead technician shrieked. "He's reversing the frequency. He's using the core against us." But it wasn't just a reversal. Ashen wasn't sending pain, he was sending memory. Every act of cruelty, every child taken, every human forgotten, every colony silenced. The truth surged through the core like a tidal wave, and it broke them. Outside the facility, Elara led a small team through the storm. No guns, just presence. As they stepped onto the ground, the Varnak outside dropped to their knees. Not in pain, in understanding. They saw what Ashen showed them, and they knew they had lost, not because they were weak, but because they had finally been made to feel inside. The chamber, the core cracked open. A final pulse echoed through the planet, and then silence. True silence. Ashen stood alone again. Threx was gone. The chamber empty. The weapon shattered. Ashen turned and walked back into the light. Weeks later, the Varnak Empire collapsed not with war, but with surrender. World by world, they laid down arms. They spoke not with power, but with apology. Humanity didn't cheer, they didn't celebrate, because Ashen had taught them something deeper. Revenge fades, but echoes remain in the final scene. Ashen returned to a quiet world. No name, no noise. Elara stood waiting by a river. She looked up at him. Is it over? Ashen nodded. For now, what happens next? Ashen looked out at the horizon. We teach, we protect, we wait. She smiled. Will they come again? He didn't answer because he didn't need to. The stars turned, the galaxy moved, but deep in its silence, one name was never forgotten. Ashen, the silent human, the whisper that became a storm, the nothing that became a storm, the nothing that became everything. And as long as injustice lived, as long as cruelty found a voice, silence would rise again, and it would speak with one name,